Hello and welcome to Susu's Kindergarten Videos. Today we are going to have a science class. It is the first day of spring and everyone is starting to think about their vegetable gardens. And it's very important before we start planting, we want to make sure that the pH and the nutrient content in the soil is as close to perfect as we can get before we start planting our seeds and vegetables. So it's time to do a soil test. And you can actually go to your local university, and we're very lucky to have Virginia Tech here. And you can pick up a soil test box, and it has instructions on it. On what to do, and you collect the soil and then you take it back and they will run tests on it and tell you what your pH is and also what your nutrient levels are. And you can also go to your extension agency. They will also have boxes that you can get to collect your soil in. And those services are free. But I thought it would be fun today for us to actually do a soil test ourselves. So I purchased this kit, and we are going to look at the pH, the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that's in my soil in the vegetable garden. Now I want to explain a little bit about the pH scale. And I have here a photograph of the scale, and you can see over here on the left on the red side from 0 to 6 is acidic. The closer to 0, the more acid that substance is. Now if you go on to the other side from 8 to 14, that is alkaline. And right in the middle is neutral. Number 7 is neutral on the pH scale. And if you get right around between 6 and 8 on the pH scale, most things in your vegetable garden are going to grow very well. Now, there are going to be things that are going to grow outside of that range. For example, blueberries. They like to be a little more acidic. So if you're growing something specific, you would want to check to see what the pH level is that they would grow best at. And, you know, the pH allows the nutrients to be able to taken up by the plant. So you want to get the pH as close to correct for that specific plant as you possibly can. Now, some common things that you may be aware of that are acidic is lemons. Lemons are pretty acidic, and limes are going to be down on this end of the pH scale. Now, on the alkaline side, soap is a good example of something that's alkaline. Neutral, number 7, water would be a good example of something that you're very familiar with. So we're going to test our soil to see, hopefully, if it's somewhere around 7. And that's going to be very good for most vegetables that I'm going to be growing this year. The next thing that I want to test for are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are considered macronutrients. They are used in large quantities in plants. Now, right here, I have a photograph of the periodic table of elements. And this has all the elements on Earth. And they're basically building blocks. Either one can make up an item, or they can build on one another and combine to form something else. So the periodic table is very important to chemists and to biologists because, as I said, everything on Earth is on this table. And the three that I'm going to talk about today are nitrogen, which is N on the periodic table. P is for phosphorus, and K is for potassium. Now, as I said, these are very important to the growth and development of plant material. Nitrogen is going to make your foliage green. All the plants that you see that have green, they're utilizing the fertilizer nitrogen. Potassium is very important to root development, fruit, and flower development. Potassium is very important for all the processes that take place in a plant. It keeps things going really well, so potassium is also very important. Now you can see here that I have a couple of fertilizers that you can purchase, and I use them for a variety of reasons. This particular one is a powdered, it's blue, and you mix that with water. And I use that for my house plants and for my flowering annuals that I put in containers in the spring. And you can see these three numbers on the container. And the first one is nitrogen, the second one is phosphorus, and the third is potassium. So anytime you see those numbers in a row on fertilizer, that is going to tell you the NPK. And there's 20% of each one of those nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium in this fertilizer. Now here is a granular fertilizer called Osmocote, and you can see here these tiny small granules. That's what this looks like, and this is considered a slow release fertilizer. It's not available all at once to the plants, and I kind of like that, and I use this some in my vegetable garden, and you can see the NPK on this label, and it is 14, 14, and 14. So it has 14% of each of those elements in this fertilizer. Now, you can purchase fertilizer, and that's okay, but probably a better way is to have a compost, and that's going to be a video all on its own. But basically, it's where you collect your table scraps, your scraps of fruits and vegetables that you're not eating, and things like eggshells and coffee grounds, and you put those together with grass clippings, leaves, and it creates almost a soil that has nutrients in it that can be used very well if you incorporate it into your vegetable gardens or your perennial gardens for that matter, or any soil that you're planting something in. So I really enjoy using compost. It really helps with the structure of the soil and also adding some of these nutrients that are so important for the growth of the plants and vegetables that we're trying to grow. So now I want to actually do a soil test. So I'm going to collect some soil, and we have some vials here that we're going to use. This one's going to be for the pH, and these three are for the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. So I will continue with our little experiment today, and we'll see what the pH and the elements are in my vegetable garden soil. I have followed the instructions on the soil test kit, and I went out into the garden and I collected some soil. And the instructions said to go down about 4 inches into the garden and to get your soil, which I did. And normally with a regular soil test that you would get from your extension office, you would go to a variety of spots within your garden that you want to test. And I think I may have to do that based on the results I've received. What I also was instructed to do was to put a cup of soil in a jar and then add 5 cups of water, distilled water, which I purchased, and stir that up and then let that settle. You can see the sediments have settled to the bottom of the jar. And then what I did, I put the capsule that was in each tube, I put the powder down in here, and then I went along and filled it up the rest of the way with this soil water mixture. And let that sit for 10 minutes. And I did that for the nitrogen and the phosphorus and also the potassium. And you are supposed to be able to compare your results to this chart here on the soil test kit. And this is the nitrogen, and it's supposed to be pink. But I am not detecting any pink at all in there. So if this is accurate, that means my nitrogen is very low, which is concerning, of course. On the phosphorus, same thing. It is supposed to be blue. If you get into a really light shade here of blue, then that means you have a low amount of phosphorus. I did not even get that to turn blue at all. It sat there for 10 minutes. So if this is accurate, I have a low amount of phosphorus. Lastly, on the potassium, which is the last column here, this did color up a little rust, but again, it does seem to be on the low level down here in the corner for potassium. So if this soil test kit is correct, it looks like I have a lot of work to do to get my nutrient levels up in the garden. So I'm going to have to add fertilizer. I need to work on my compost and add compost to the garden to get my nutrient levels up. And I do think I will go to the extension office and get a soil test kit and come back and do another sample and take it back to them. And maybe they have a more sophisticated type of soil test kit that will be able to tell a little bit more about what's in my soil. They also can not only test for the micronutrients, but also the macronutrients, which is what we just tried to test. The micronutrients, they're needed just a little bit less in the garden for the plants. And they're important, of course, but it's the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that are really critical. So I will do that just to see, because again, I'm not sure how accurate this soil test is. Next, we have the pH test that I haven't completed yet, and I did put a little bit of soil to the first line on the tube. Then I emptied out the capsule and put it down in there, and now we are going to add some fresh distilled water. So let me put some in a cup here. And then I will take my dropper here and collect some of the water and then we will add it right here to the tube, and I'll get a little bit more because you're supposed to fill it pretty close to the top. Just a little bit more. Okay, there we are. Now I'm going to put the caps right on the tube, and it says to shake it up. So I'm doing that. And then we have to wait about a minute. So I will time this. It's 2:22, so in about a minute we'll be able to see what the pH is in my soil. So I'm looking forward to learning that. If we're in the green range, which it's beginning to color up there, you can see the green color start to develop, which means it's going to be in the neutral range, which is awesome. And we'll look at our chart here. Yes, you can see that the green is neutral, which, if you recall, that is exactly what we want for growing vegetables, is a neutral pH. And I think we have accomplished that. Now, it's not dark enough to be alkaline, which is a very dark green. It looks right on neutral, number 7. So very exciting. I'm glad the pH worked on this, and I'm glad my pH is correct for growing vegetables. That's exciting. But I think I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board on the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So there you have it. With Susu's kindergarten videos. This was a little bit different. We got to delve into the science aspect of growing plants. There is a lot of science that's involved in growing things, and I hope you learned a lot by introducing you to the periodic table of elements. That was fun, and also the pH scale. And we talked about acidity and alkalinity, and how that affects how the plants take up those nutrients that are available in the soil. We want the pH to be just right so that the plant has the ability to take up those nutrients. And Susu has to get out in her garden and add some fertilizer, it looks like. Even though we were able last year to grow fruits, vegetables out there, and but I'm going to do it again and see what I come up with, and I'll let you know. Happy spring! Over and out from Susu's Garden. Love you.